started, if I can. Hope that we got everybody, we've at least got a quorum of the committee anyway, so. Okay, it's 7:01, so we'll start the meeting, call to order. Like everybody to look at the agenda that we've been given for June 1st. And is there any comments? Can we have somebody, oh, sorry, Melissa, you got some comment?
Yeah, we're wondering if we could add an item to the agenda this evening.
Okay, for sure.
So we'd like to add the community survey to the agenda.
Okay, where would that go?
That I think that's up to you, but we could place it after the committee makes their presentations.
Okay. Okay, so make that 4A. Okay. Can I have somebody move this agenda then for tonight?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Larry, and seconded by,
I'll second it.
okay, Sandra. Okay, thank you. Okay, so has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes of the May 4th meeting?
Sorry, Chair. Can you take a vote on it? So if we know that it's carried?
Okay, all in favor? Okay, looks unanimous. Okay, we'll move on then for the minutes to the May 4th meeting. Everybody looked at it. Does anybody move the?
I'll move that as well.
Okay, Larry, seconded by Mary Ann. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, it looks like that's unanimous then. Okay, so I guess moving right along, we're into the item 4, research team's presentation. And well, there's Ralph now, good. Okay, I don't know who's gonna present, but I propose we'll just go in the order that they were presented or finished and submitted. So waste management and recycling. I don't know who's giving that one, but
Janet is representing our group.
okay.
Do you want to share your screen, Janet? Or no?
No, I don't have that.
Okay.
I don't have that going on. But okay, so can everybody hear me?
Yep, fine.
Okay, good. So we took on waste management and recycling, and bottom line is obviously we started looking at what Belcarra has in their existing OCP. And for the most part, so I'll go through it quickly because it's quite short, support Metro.
Whoop.
Oh, no.
Well, there she's back over in the corner. You know, sound.
There we
Turn
go.
on your-
Okay, thank you.
Maybe this is a bad sign. Okay. Anyway, so in the existing OCP, what it says is support Metro Vancouver's zero waste objectives, examine options to reduce quantities of waste, continue to support recycling, support village-wide composting initiatives. So basically, our assessment is that those are all still applicable. And so basically, our approach is going to be kind of to build on or improve upon what we already have. So you know, we are a small village. There's not a lot that needs to be added to this, but I will go through sort of what we came up with. So in terms of the other OCPs that were reviewed, Anmore was one of them, probably kind of for obvious reasons, but and the bottom line there is, again, one of the focuses is really more to do with septic systems, handling of sewage, et cetera, and they have a comment in there is about private sewage disposal systems will continue to be approved by the BC Ministry of Health or Ministry of Environment. And so these sort of provincial approvals obviously would also apply to Belcarra. So that was one of the things in Anmore. And then also they have some language in there about considering proposals from developers that involve private package treatment plants, et cetera. And again, provided that these facilities are owned and operated by professionals and reputable utility companies, so determined by the village. So again, I think it's more along the lines of keeping an eye on those opportunities and those innovations and those, updates as they come, and then managing it accordingly. So, but again, largely it's making sure that whatever we're doing adheres to Ministry of Environment and the other governing authorities. We also looked at Lions Bay. One of the things that kind of stands out on that one for me is the bear issues. So, when you talk about waste and garbage and whatnot, and, managing what attracts bears and trying to keep that to a minimum. And clearly we've had some of that ourselves in the last little while, considering we had our garage door handle ripped off because it's one of those lever ones just 2 days ago. And so they're getting quite creative. So I think we need to, we need to be aware of that, and whatever we can do to try to, prevent that from continuing on, I think is obviously the right thing to do. We also looked at Bowen Island, and obviously Bowen Island has some unique challenges in that they're an island. And so a lot of what they're dealing with in terms of their OCP is really, again, septic systems, making sure that we're not, poisoning the environment with the septic systems, making sure everything, is permitted by the Ministry of Health, Coastal Health Authority. But they also, everything they have in the way of waste is hauled off the island. So they really have, kind of a push to see how much they can manage within the island itself versus trucking it off the island. So that was one of the interesting kind of differences, I guess, with them, being that they're on an island. Yeah, so one of the things, they have lofty goals in terms of achieve significant reduction in off-island hauling of liquid waste and solid waste. And, being self-reliant in terms of managing their waste. So, that's a pretty lofty goal, but anyway, that was one that they had. And again, again, it comes to whatever these sewage treatment and disposal systems are, private on-site systems or whatever, but making sure that they're, adhering to all of the provincial guidelines. So that seems to be relatively consistent across a lot of these. Gold River was looked at, and again, that's another smaller community. And, they had very little in theirs. What was funny was it was to improve the waste recycling program already in place by the village. And, to some degree, I think we're sort of leaning towards that ourselves. And obviously keeping an eye on what advancements and technologies can help us in terms of this area of our OCP. And then in terms of, what can and should we do, again, because of the septic systems, because of the fact that these are on private residential lots, making sure that they adhere to all the regulations, Ministry of Health, Fraser Health Authority, Public Health Act, Ministry of Environment, et cetera, So that seems to be one of the bigger things. And we don't have a lot, currently in our OCP that talks necessarily about that piece. So that might be an opportunity to kind of bolster it a bit. And making sure Belcarra's water resources are protected from liquid waste contamination. So again, whatever we're going to approve, or, whatever is coming in terms of, future changes in this area, that's something obviously to be considered. And then in terms of solid waste, you know, the system that we have in place, I think we kind of agreed is, you know, it's probably, you know, delivering what we need. I think outside of potentially doing a little bit more around the bear aware, and then and yeah, so the wildlife management piece is one that probably needs to be considered, especially when we talk about composting initiatives, that type of thing. So those are things that, you know, and again, making sure that residents are aware of what not to put in the waste. So whether that's, you know, styrofoam, wood, gyprock, chemicals, paints, etc. I think people are probably somewhat aware of that, but maybe they're, you know, maybe we could do a little bit more in terms of making sure that's really clear to people, what can't go in waste. And then in terms of final thoughts and recommendations, yeah, overall, the current solid waste management program seems adequate. You know, current policy should be updated as recycling options evolve. And this is one that I particularly like. So Belcarra residents have been known to place unwanted items by the curb for others who can reuse them. So, you know, you'll see people put things out on the curb and it says free, you know, please take it. And it's a great first step before throwing it in the trash. And so is there an opportunity to formalize that with a few days a year where you would have almost a, what did I call it? A roadside reuse day. So, you know, you think about, you know, reuse, recycle, etc. But, you know, I mean, personally, I've picked up a couple of planters and I've gotten rid of some, you know, headboards and footboards off of a bed that I didn't need any longer. And, you know, people, you put it free and people pick it up. And it's a lot better than having it go in the waste. So, you know, that was one opportunity. And then in terms of the whole liquid waste, septic systems have improved and continue to as technological advances are made. And Belcarra should continue to work with the appropriate authorities and monitor these options and innovations to ensure best practices are adhered to. And then on that note, just one thing that I came across as well was, so the Capital Regional District, in terms of, you know, their septic systems that people are using, they require that maintenance plans be filed and reported on by residents annually, which may be overkill for us, but you know, maybe every 5 years. And also as new solutions are permitted, does it make sense to have that type of thing in place where, you know, you report out on that? And I think, you know, Ralph, you had mentioned that the health authority is doing that in some cases as well. So that was kind of where we landed on that. So I don't know if anybody in the team has anything else to add.
I think you covered everything that we discussed. Great, thank you.
Okay,
Yep, thanks, Janet. Good job.
you're welcome.
Okay, is there any other questions from the other committee members?
Well, that's good. That's easy.
Perfect presentation. That's good.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, we'll move on then to the next, which would be in order of submission through so complete communities. I guess, Larry, you're gonna give our group's submission.
Yes, thanks, Ian. And I'm not set up to share screen, but Paula is going to help me get our pages up. So thank you very much, Paula. I see that one's up. If we could go to page 2, please. Great. So what how I'm going to go through this, I'd like to start with the definition of complete communities. And we looked at commercial and also looked at alternative housing. The main focus of this seemed to be commercial, but we did look at alternative housing. And we actually looked at a couple of other areas as well. Those are in the document, but the focus of the presentation will be mainly commercial and the housing areas that we looked at. And then we'll look at what the relevant sections are in Belcarra's OCP, a bit of info on some of the other OCPs that we looked at. not going to go through all of the detail, but we'll just go through some highlights and then look at our final thoughts and recommendations and suggestions. So just quickly, a complete community, and I'm just going to read from what you're seeing in front of you, is considered an idealistic land use approach that applies a mix of residential, commercial, and recreational uses, among others, to create a more livable environment. Consideration of balanced land use approach that includes uses such as permissive commercial in a useful exercise for Belcarra in understanding how to best accommodate the needs, and feedback from public has indicated an interest in exploring what a new limited commercial designation could look like. So if you could scroll down a bit, please, Paula. Yeah, keep going, please. Okay, sorry, come back. My apologies, I'm not used to doing this. I wanted to get to item C. Thank you, that's good. And all I wanted to emphasize here, in our existing OCP, there's a section, section C, that does talk about standalone accessory suites up to 4 small houses on 1 acre and duplexes. So that's the only point I wanted to make on that. And if we could go to the next page, Paula, please. Okay, main thing here is just at the very top under commercial industrial, our plan, it says no commercial or industrial activities will be developed in the village during the time period of this plan. And then if we can scroll down more to the bottom of that page, item 5.4. Perfect. So at the bottom there, it says, given this is talking about developing complete communities, and it's a comment on why that's difficult for Belcarra to do in its entirety. So given the relative isolated geographic location, the desire to remain as a semi-rural community and lack of available infrastructure, the OCP plan does not provide the creation of a complete community as envisioned by the regional growth strategy. So I just wanted, that's the comments on complete communities in our OCP. And if we could go to the next page, please, Paul. Thank you. So we looked at Anmore was one of the communities we looked at. In their land use, they talk about the use of the village's clustered housing zoning is strongly encouraged. The village encourages subdivision applicants considering developing along the village's hillside area to undertake coordinated planning efforts between landowners rather than developing each property individually. Those were some of the comments on land. If we could scroll down a little bit, Paula, in the commercial use, that's good, thank you. If we look here, policy CL2, the village supports the exploration of commercial opportunities subject to a public rezoning process. The one below small scale commercial opportunities should be considered. And below that, future commercial uses that are in keeping with the semi-rural nature of the village may be considered. So some of the comments from the Anmore OCP. And if we could go to the next page, please, Paul. Okay, so this is Lions Bay, and just the top part we're going to look at here initially. There's a limited supply of land within the village to accommodate new development. That being said, opportunities for providing different housing forms for those at different stages of their life will be considered with the context of compatibility with the character of the village. This could take the form of suites within houses, the development or redevelopment of specific sites undertaken in a socially and environmentally sensitive manner. There's a limited range of commercial and/or employment opportunities in the village. Okay, if we could scroll down to Bowen Island, which is about in the middle of the page. Yep, perfect. Okay, so Bowen Island they refer mainly to cluster housing and affordable homes in lieu of complete communities. And they talk about low building density is encouraged, except that cluster housing is favored. And if we could just go right down to the bottom of that page, Paula. So they have a co-housing development that they talk about, and it says the Belterra project represents a form of unique housing development not previously found on Bowen Island, and it's characterized by clustered compact buildings that will integrate both market and non-market homes. Common area will provide shared facilities that will support interaction among neighbors and function as an extension of private dwellings, making it possible to reduce home size and overall carbon footprint without negatively impacting lifestyle. So that's one thing that they have. And if we could go to the next page. And it just continuing with that, it says it's characterized by clustered compact buildings that will integrate both market and non-market. And policy 160 here, this is still Bowen. The municipality will consider applications for townhouses in the village. Down to what policy 162, municipality will consider small lot residential development at 8 lots per net developable acre with a minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet, and policy 163, up to 12.5 units per net developable acre will be considered appropriate for townhouse and residential development. And then down to the bottom of the page, policy 388 talks about the municipality supports the findings and recommendations of the age-friendly community project. These were some items that we thought were quite useful to look at and consider. They're not necessarily directly related to housing alternatives or the commercial aspects, but we did look at those, and we'll talk about them a little bit later because we have them a little bit further on in our in the report. So if we could go to the next page, Paula, please. Okay, this talks about Bowen Island home businesses. We're on Bowen Island now. And policy 413 is home-based business will be regulated primarily on the basis of performance standards related to noise, nuisance, odors, disturbances, unsightly premises, and other matters that could affect neighbors' peaceful enjoyment. Okay, so those were just some kind of snapshots of relevant areas within some of the other OCPs that we looked at that relate to both commercial and housing alternatives. So if we could go to the next page, please, page 8. So this is a Crofton concept where they've shown a layout, and I just want to read some of what they say on it. Land use goals: enhance existing single-family neighborhoods and increase density through infill and greater housing diversity. Encourage well-designed homes for small lots serviced by alleys to avoid street-loaded garages becoming the dominant design features. Allow for carriage houses at the rear of the lot, suites above rear-loaded garages or laneway homes, and cluster smaller homes around common open space. And if we could just scroll down, Paula, just to below that. Yeah, so they talk about cluster. Sorry, we go back. Yeah, okay, so they talk about cluster small homes around open space, new developments with strong pedestrian connections and linkages to existing sidewalks, range of housing for young families, singles, and seniors. Key features include fourplex, triplex, duplexes designed to appear as single-family homes to retain the rural character of greenfield areas while providing additional density and incentives for new development. Okay, and if we could go over to the next page. So these are some of our final thoughts and recommendations and the policies from other communities that might be applicable. So the first one is dealing with housing. Village of Belcarra might be receiving creative designs from developers who wish to construct facilities on developable lots that might be asking for building permits. The new OCP should be recognizing that the Village of Belcarra can benefit from new creative developments. Some may not even be known about at present. And they should have wording in the OCP so that they could possibly proceed with perhaps only a zoning amendment rather than having to open the OCP for amendment. And then the next one, the Lions Bay, commercial home businesses provide increased local business opportunities by permitting home businesses, provided that the activity does not detract from the existing village quality of life through traffic, parking, signage, storage, nuisance appearance, or character. And the next item down are the 8 items that we just looked at from the Bowen Island policy, and these cover a number of areas. Outdoor spaces in public buildings that are pleasant, clean, secure, and physically accessible. Public transportation that is accessible and affordable. Housing that is affordable, appropriately located, well built. Opportunities for social participation, leisure, school, cultural, and other. Older people are treated with respect and included in civic life. opportunities for employment and volunteerism that cater to older persons' interests, age-friendly communication, and information is available, community support and health tailored to older persons' needs. So we've included that, even though it's not directly on topic with some of what we were asked to look at. Okay, if we could scroll down. Please, Paula. Yeah, that's good there. If we can start there. So I'm gonna discuss this. This is Farrer Cove. Comments here are related to Farrer Cove commercial, and I'm gonna talk about these in a little different order than they're there, but the material would be covered. So currently, the only commercial venture is the tea room on the ELC lands in Farrer Cove. And the ELC has commercial plans for a portion of their property in Farrer Cove, and they have provided material to the village regarding those plans. The next comments I've got are from Urban Systems from their ELC land slide that they had at the last OCP meeting, where they say the property is constrained due to lack of access. I'm assuming that's referring to no public road. They say there is no need to rush the ELC planning process to meet the OCP review and timeline. And they say ELC may apply for an OCP amendment when their access issue has been resolved and they have further defined the development plans. So I think the main thing, that the main reason for this being on here is to let people know that ELC definitely has commercial development plans for a portion of their lands. And I think there's obviously more communication that needs to take place around this, but they have that interest and they want to move along with that. And the comments after this, if you could, well, actually they start here, so we can just look at that initially. I'm not going to read all these, but the comments that follow contain some of the sections in the existing OCP that support a new access road to Farrer Cove. And these sections should be retained in the new OCP, including the section that says that none of the capital road costs will be borne by the village. And the OCP suggests a new road, but progress has been slow. If we go on to the next page, please, Paula. Yeah, that's good. So the first step in trying to obtain permission for the road that crosses Metro Vancouver Park and is within the first step is to try to obtain permission for the road that goes across Metro Vancouver Park land that is within the city of Port Moody. This is currently being worked on by some residents, owners in Farrer Cove and Belcarra Council and staff. And the road is mentioned here because it is relevant. But this section really is mainly to talk about commercial uses. The road information on the road would end up being in a different section of the OCP, but we're talking about it here because it is relevant to the topic in this section. And then there are some comments on road costs and the requirement for federal provincial grants, and also the importance of good and ongoing communication between the village and Farrer Cove. And there's just an update on the communication at the bottom of this. Paula, maybe if you can just scroll down a little bit more. So that's just an update on some recent communication. And if we could go to the next page, please. Okay, so this actually is a page from our Belcarra historian, Mr. Ralph. And I think it's a really interesting item. I'm going to read a little bit from it just to set the stage, and then I'll see if Ralph has any comments that he would like to add. But it says, during the negotiations between Belcarra and the GVRD from 1980-1983, sanctioned and encouraged by the province, there were several key principles endorsed regarding the development of Belcarra as a municipality. And one of these key principles was that Belcarra should be permitted to pursue residential infill around its existing road structure. So if we jump down to where it says the process would involve, there's 4 steps that it outlines. And if you can scroll down a bit more, Paula, please, to where there's a drawing there. This shows the location of these parcels. And these are parcels of Crown land that could easily be used to create types of cluster housing, having a land density of 2 homes per acre. Properly designed, those parcels of land could have the potential to accommodate at least 12 dozen residential houses, perhaps more duplexes and triplexes were part of the design. So at the very bottom, if you could scroll down a bit further. So the committee recommends the designation of the above noted portions of parcel 48 as future residential on the OPC land use map. And that recommendation is consistent with step 1 in the process. So that's the recommendation that comes with this. Ralph, is there anything you would like to add to this?
No, I mean, that's it in brief. I'd be happy to answer specific questions, but back after we incorporated, we spent 3 years negotiating between the GVRD and ourselves at the behest of the provincial government to resolve the interface issues. And we covered many different principles. And one we are touching on even today is that all parking for the Belcarra picnic site will be south of Belcarra Bedwell Bay Road and Midden Road. But one of the other principles was infilling around the existing road structure. Now, it has sat there for 40 years. And people might ask, well, why haven't we acted on it before that? Well, because 11 years ago and prior, we didn't have a municipal water system. And the parcel 48 lands were designated as municipal watershed. But that has all changed now. We now have a municipal water system. 75% of households are connected. So we can now move from protecting the watershed to the next step, which is designating those areas for infill along Bedwell Bay Road. So, I mean, it's taken a long time, but back in 1983, we were looking at the future of the village from the long term. And guess what? The long term is here.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. So if we could scroll a little bit further, Paula, please. Okay, so we do not anticipate a community sewer system becoming available. These were just some of the discussions and comments that that we wanted to get down within Belcarra over the period of this OCP update. The OCP should try to accommodate any new innovative designs for Belcarra, and the village might look to offer greater flexibility for developers to propose useful complete community designs through some sort of land assembly. Public consultation would be required. If we could scroll down a little bit more, Paula. Land assembly is permitted in Belcarra already, and consolidation of pre-existing parcels has already occurred in the past. Clarification is required regarding what Belcarra may contemplate with zoning, specifically the limitations necessitated by private septic systems and presumed zoning limitations within Metro Vancouver versus provincial subdivision regulations. It would be beneficial to have clarity on the issue. Belcarra should investigate options to support smaller floor space housing options, such as clustered small homes around open areas for residents who might also encompass shared outdoor public spaces. This housing would be designed to not detract from existing community character, and our village should continue to support coach houses and accessory suites as alternative home options for both short-term and long-term residential. And okay, if we could scroll down just to the resources. Okay, so this is the list, and I think we didn't get links, looks like on Enmore and Lions Bay. They're there for the Bowen and Crofton OCPs. We'll talk about the sewage on the next page. Subdivision regulations that Jen has provided, we've included a link to those. And if we could go over to the next page, please, Paula. And these are just some sewerage and subdivision best practice guidelines. I'm not going to go through these, but it's obviously important that anything that's planned has to meet the current appropriate applicable requirements for sewage. And that's a factor with anything that gets looked at. And I think that's what I was going to say. So if there's any question, if any of the committee members would like to comment, you can do that first. If not, if there's any questions for me or for Ralph, we can work into those. And sorry about my voice, I'm losing it. All good?
Sounds pretty good, Larry.
Okay.
Is anybody in that? Okay, Mary Ann, you've got your hand up for question? You got your speaker.
Thank you very much. That was really comprehensive. One thing I, have internalized from our existing OCP is 3.1.1 residential land use policies. It specifically says, for the purpose of new subdivision activity within the zoning bylaw, the minimum lot size regulations for single family lots shall be 0.5 acres. And then for no public road access, it'll be 1 acre. So the our current OCP is quite prescriptive about that.
Yes,
So it wasn't just left to the zoning bylaw.
yeah, are you referring to one of the other bullets that we just went over?
I'm referring to 3.1.1 of the existing OCP.
Yes. And I would expect that there would be similar wording that probably covers minimum lot size in the OCP. I don't know that for sure, but I think the intent of what we had said there was to try not to put a bunch of things in the OCP that could be handled by zoning. Ralph, go ahead, please. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Mary Ann. We'll come back. I think Ralph can probably add to this.
I was going to say, for large parcels, let's say the future residential areas or acreages in Fair Cove, or where properties are assembled. And that would then come under development permit applications. And the issue of sewerage would be specifically handled by Fraser Health and their requirements with innovative systems with all of the reporting requirements. So there's sort of two levels. It's in a general sense for, people with a lot and they decide they want to subdivide it, there's a floor. And Mary Ann, as you know, Bill Carey at 0.5 acres minimum lot size is already very consistent with many other municipalities, being much larger than that. But having that having been said, where larger cluster developments or something is occurred, that invokes development permit processes and the involvement of Fraser Health.
Did that answer your question, Mary Ann, or is there still a part of it that you?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to point out that, every OCP I've looked at does say some things about, subdivisions, lot sizes,
Yes.
and things like that. So it seemed to me to be a normal part of an OCP to put in something.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
So let's see, there we go. How do I hit my button here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So am I supposed, there should be a place here for me to hit my hand and I don't see it.
We see you.
Yeah. All right, can I, do I have the floor or?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Are you finished, Mary Ann? Okay, yes,
Do I have the floor?
yes.
Yeah. So personally, I think that the OCP has taken a stand on this and it is a half an acre, and I'd be very disappointed if we change that. I think we're looking for a lot more traffic to be going on Bedwell Bay Road. It's the singular in and out of this particular village. On the initial, survey that we did, was very, very popular that people were worried about the traffic on Bedwell Bay Road. For the development, let's say the 5 acres on Sinclair Road, for the development of the other property we're talking about, the other two, we're going to have a lot more congestion there and a lot more concern than we have already. If we start subdividing further, we're going to exacerbate the problem. So the white elephant in the room, or the big elephant, or whatever the invisible elephant in the room is, do we want more density, or do we want to keep the status quo as reasonable as possible? And I think Marianne has hit on a point here. And that is, I think we need to be, let's say, we need to have something that's not that ambiguous. And are we going to guide ourselves to be a more dense community with more traffic on Bedwell Bay Road? Or are we going to maintain more or less a status quo of what we value in this village, that being somewhat semi-rural and being able to actually, let's say, accommodate the amount of traffic that we will be able to, let's say, be comfortable with on Bedwell Bay Road? That's really where we're headed here. And I'm personally of the opinion that half acre is definitive, and it sends a message if we say half acre, but this or but that, and the door is half open or something. I don't think we're getting enough leadership from the OCP. There's not enough guidance, and that's kind of closing that for me just now.
Okay, thank you. I'm starting to wonder if I should continue kind of moderating this, or if it should go back to you, Ian. I'm fine either way, but I think it's maybe
Well,
one that should go back to you.
I see Ralph's hand up, so I guess we'll recognize him.
Thank you. Paul, I totally agree with you, but it's the discussion about traffic, et cetera, due to increased density is more than just about the density. Because what we're talking about is safety along Bedwell Bay Road as well. And if all of a sudden you can start chopping lots in half, the half acre lots, now you drastically start increasing driveway access onto Bedwell Bay Road, which is a whole nother ballgame. So I think we are very well positioned to maintain 0.5 acre where we are. That's certainly supported in Bowen Island and other communities. And if you start to look a little further afield, rural communities, the minimum lot size, in fact, is 1 hectare, which is 2.5 acres. So Belcarra is already very much at the lower end of the minimum lot size.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments?
Maybe one more.
Okay,
Am I allowed?
of course.
Well, I think less density or the status quo benefits everybody. I think more density benefits a few people. In other words, if you've got a property that you'd like to subdivide, it's a wonderful thing that you can subdivide further. But as a municipality as a whole, is it benefiting that, the entire municipality, or just a couple of people? And that's the end of that.
Yeah. Okay, Janet, saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess for me, when I think about what we're going to, allow in terms of development, there's bigger issues than the traffic, for starters. There's also the tax base, which I think needs to be considered. And I run Bedwell Bay Road every day. And so the bigger issues I run into there are people that miss the turn off to the park, and they don't know the area and they're driving around. It's not typically the people in Belcarra. And so anyway, that's just my thought. I think there's a bit bigger issue than just the traffic that we need to consider.
Okay, thank you. Well, Paul.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm being polite here or impolite. Am I being impolite by talking so much?
This is third time. We'll have to get it all together this time, Paul.
Okay, this is the last. I'm not sure whether there's a cost benefit if we increase our tax base for what we elicit from taxes. I'm not sure that we're going to benefit from as a municipality as a whole. If you add up the costs and the benefit, I'm not sure that increase in the revenue, the costs associated with servicing those extra people, boy, it's kind of a wash in the community of this size, in my opinion. That's it for that.
Okay, thank you. Whoops, Marianne? Whoop.
Honestly, I think this, let's be real here. This is a very hot topic in this community. It has been for some time and it's still not resolved. And there are, I feel, I sense, I hear actual geographical divisions within the community about the issue. And what I would really like is, I just feel like we're rushing. I feel like we haven't had enough opportunity for people to get together and speak with one another and listen to each other. You know, land use is the biggest part of most OCPs. And I just don't know that we've heard enough from our entire community about it.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got one more presentation to make, so I'm not sure we can carry on with this discussion, but I see Melissa's got her hand up and would like to say something.
Yeah, I do. I think one, we have to recognize the servicing constraints within the community, which limit options for development. The second thing, I've been working with Metro Vancouver on a project where we've been reviewing every OCP for each of the municipalities across the region. And one thing that Metro has strongly been encouraging and has definitely been reflected in the latest generation of OCPs that have come forward are minimum lot sizes. So the region will be looking for a number in your plan. It helps them test whether or not their population employment projections are going to be correct moving forward. So that number will be something that they will be looking for. So I would strongly encourage keeping it within the plan.
Okay. Sounds good. I saw Tracy's hand up and then gone. Are you done? Okay.
Yeah, no, sorry, Ian. Yeah, I mean, it was just to kind of reiterate, I'm fairly newish to the village and, don't really have a full understanding of this. And I agree with the previous to last speaker that it would be really good to have a session where, people could come together and talk about this because, thanks to you and John, I mean, I've become aware about this, but it's not something that's on my radar. So really love to talk to Ralph and to people who have historical information in this village and just, figure out what collectively we think is the best way forward, because I do realize there's a lot of divisions. And obviously people aren't necessarily tuning into these things unless they're, inherently pro or against. Okay, I'm Irish, so I'm going to go for we need to turn the little village into an Irish pub on a Friday evening so we all can get together casually and talk about these things and like iron out a lot of stuff. But I feel like I'm listening to this and I'm fascinated, but I feel like I know so little about the historical information and the reasons and the pros and cons. And every time I hear from somebody, I am always kind of, are they pro this way or pro that way? Am I hearing biased information? So for me, as a pretty new person into the village who has, I do have strong opinions about a lot of things, but and I do have strong opinions. I love this village. My God, I love it. It's named after a village in Ireland. But I would just love the chance to talk to people a bit more informally about this and just have the chance to chat about it. So yeah, sorry, that's my contribution. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, thank you very much, Tracy. I actually was recognizing one of the committee members called Tracy, but I got this beautiful Irish brogue coming through, so We just had to let you carry on.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, can I think, because if there's no other comments on that, I think we really should carry on with the inclusive housing group presentation. I don't know who's giving that, but
I can do that one. Hi,
okay,
everybody.
thanks, Kevin. All right.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thanks very much for the for that, Larry. That was quite well done. Really well done. Very comprehensive. And there was a lot of overlap between the two of our groups. So do we have the ability to share a screen here? I see if I can manage this. See if I can share my screen with.
Okay, you should be able to share now, Kevin.
Let's see here. Okay, sorry for that. Share screen. Okay. Is that working for everybody or no?
Not yet.
Cool. How's that? Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks again. So learning about, so our group was inclusive approach to housing affordability, housing for different life stages. And learning about this topic with my group by reading Belcarra's Housing Needs Assessment, reviewing other OCPs and articles brought to my attention the importance of inclusive housing. As a firefighter with the City of Vancouver, I've had the privilege of seeing all sorts of housing from co-ops, high-rises, assisted living facilities, even in the notorious SROs of the downtown east side. Some of these prior experiences with what I've had, I thought that inclusive housing had no relevance to Belcarra. And this was my initial misunderstanding, as I had no idea what the infrastructure and how inclusive housing can build vibrant, diverse, and complete communities. So to facilitate common understanding, I'd just like to start with some of the definitions we started had to work with for inclusive housing, affordable housing, and aging in place. Inclusive housing encompasses buildings, developments, and neighborhoods that are home to people with diverse life experiences, backgrounds, and needs. This includes people who have been historically isolated, segregated from communities, such as people with developmental disabilities. Inclusive communities are welcoming to diverse groups. Sorry, I wonder if this is gonna, sorry. There we go. Inclusive communities are welcoming to diverse groups of people, including but not limited to seniors, children, Aboriginal peoples, immigrants, and newcomers, persons with disabilities, and people with mental health challenges, and low-income populations. Housing inclusivity looks at how where you live impacts your participation in the larger community. More inclusive housing makes participation in the community easier. Less inclusive housing creates barriers to participating fully. So what is housing affordability? In Canada, housing affordability costs less than 30% of households before tax income. Many people think the term affordable housing refers only to rental housing that is subsidized by the government. In reality, it is a very broad term that can include housing provided by private, public, and nonprofit sectors. It also includes all forms of housing, tenure, rental, ownership, and cooperative ownership, as well as temporary and permanent housing. So aging in place, another definition we had to work with is the ability to live in one's home and community safely, independently, comfortably, regardless of age, income, and ability level. So why is this is important? Because they tell us it's important. It's part of the of our mandate. So this this is currently not very well addressed in the current OCP, but the village does recognize the fact that our housing has been transformed from cottages and summer houses to expansive residence that presents a challenge for long-term residents wishing to downsize and young families seeking to join the community. We found in our research that the median age in Belcarra is 55, up from 52.8 in the 2016 census, compared to a median age of 43.8 in BC generally. Our current OCP states this trend of narrowing demographics does not bode well for community sustainability. We also find that the current OCP explores some ideas for broader housing opportunities within the village. Standalone accessory suites within an accessory building, up to 4 small houses on 1 acre, duplexes, and it talks about the Camp Howdy development as well, which is now obviously the ELC lands. We've talked a lot about that. So there's been a fair bit of overlap between the inclusive or the complete communities and inclusive housing sort of go hand in hand. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what was discussed previously. We had a lot of the similar findings that work well between Bowen Island and Belcarra. We found a lot of similar policies that would benefit the inclusive housing. So such as Lions Bay, possibility. So the accessory suites really contributes to the overall housing stock, because the majority, as the housing needs assessment shows, the majority of housing is sort of over housing. There's typically about two people in our detached houses. So that was important to encourage the secondary suites. And so Ann Moore talks about coach houses, like we talked about already. Co-housing in some of the other smaller communities was another way that this is addressed, to address housing affordability. Salt Spring, I guess, has a fair bit of co-housing. Bowen Island, like we talked, the Belterra lands, 10-acre site on Bowen Island is co-housing. So housing that is separate buildings with shared facilities. So that sort of addresses a lot of the needs for diverse communities. Let's see if I can get this to work. Where do we go here? So here's some things we pulled from the housing needs assessment that were of interest, that sort of shows a lack of affordable housing, and the reason why it's important to really look at different housing options, such as accessory suites, co-housing, and new builds. So final thoughts and recommendations. Belcarra is a unique community nestled between ocean, parkland, and forest. We are small with limited growth and housing potential. People live here, value the views, environment, and peace and tranquility that comes with a smaller community. We recognize that opportunities should be provided for different housing forms at different life stages of people's lives, while making sure housing is compatible with the character of the village. So some ideas for aging in place: this could take the form of home modifications to allow for accessible, safe, and independent living, encouraging for new construction to incorporate concepts of universal design. For example, bedroom, washrooms, and kitchens on the main floor with a floating vanity, no barrier entry, lever handles, larger door openings. Even the awareness of universal designs, reading through that study, I didn't really have an idea about the importance of that. I think it would have been helpful, I think, even just from the start of the building process, to keep those things in mind. I think even awareness kind of goes a long way to help make homes more sustainable in the long term, because we're all going to get old at some point, and we're all going to want to have a place to live within the village. So it's of critical importance. Providing more opportunities for secondary suites, carriage homes, and duplexes. Some grants for maintaining and upkeep of older homes. And then we talked extensively about Fair Cove, but hopefully there might be opportunities there as well for inclusive housing and housing for younger families that could look like carriage homes. And I think that's about, there's the housing needs assessment was quite telling of how much overhousing we have right now currently in the village, with quite a large stock of large houses with 1 to 2 people living in them. And then so I thought that was quite telling, some of the stats that were pulled from there, but it's all there in the report. So I think that's about it. I don't know if anybody else from my team has anything else to add. I see Sandra's got her hand up.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. There's a couple of things when we were doing our study with housing, which I thought was kind of innovative. I know there's co-housing in Coquitlam right now, and there's a couple of new developments have gone out with the idea of, it's not a co-op, it's like a few houses together where they share the kitchen, maybe the laundry. They have their own space, and it creates kind of a mixed community of older, younger people. And the other one was we know about in Vancouver is a multi-generational housing, where there's housing developed for all ages. And I know it's being done. I mean, the the Indo-Canadian population has done it for a long time. And one other thing was in Vancouver, because housing's so expensive, a lot of developers are doing houses where it's one house, 2 entrances, and like 2 separate living rooms. So basically there's 2 families living entirely separately in one house, and they might have the same yard, the same thing. And I thought that was kind of neat to look at as well, in terms of, besides carriage houses and duplexes. So those are things. And the other one was, cluster house. I was going to ask Larry this. You mentioned cluster housing. I haven't heard about that. Is that the same as co-housing, or is it different? Would that be roughly the same thing?
I'm sorry, same as what? I missed.
Oh,
that comment.
cluster housing, is that the same as co-housing? You had mentioned cluster housing. I just haven't heard of that.
I'm not sure if there's, Ralph, you may be able to answer this better than me. Thank you.
Yeah, no. The answer is yes and no. No, cluster housing, smaller units, on a large parcel and brought around. But co-housing is a step further than that, where they're actually sharing certain amenities and whatnot. So there's actually kind of a continuum of concepts there. And the developer, when they come forward, and that'll be market driven, they will decide, whether it's cluster housing or co-housing or, clustered duplexes. I mean, I don't know, you could go on and on, but there is a continuum there. And that would be handled under development permit in terms of development. You know, you literally can't define everything up front.
No, I was going to say there's also Salt Spring had something called flexible unit housing. I've never heard of that. It's where housing is designed for different life stages. So over a lifetime, they can be flexible and somehow change the arrangement or the structure. Anyways, there's endless possibilities, I think, out there. That's all I want to say.
Right.
Of course, they all have to go under council or under, you know, a development process, but that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. Is there any other comments from that group? Okay, how about comments from the committee members? Everybody comfortable? Okay, I think we'll proceed then. Melissa wanted to add in a section on questionnaire, so I'll give Melissa the floor.
Sure, thank you, Ian. Maybe just before we talk about that, I just want to thank the committee members for their excellent job in completing the assignments again this month. You've done a tremendous amount of research, and Andrew and I have definitely taken into consideration each and every one of the assignments that you completed and incorporated a good deal of your recommendations into the draft OCP. So thank you for your hard work. I did want to talk about the feedback form a bit because there was quite a bit of email correspondence that occurred last week over it. And so I thought maybe we could chat a little bit about that tonight. And one of the things that I heard from the comments was that there wasn't enough opportunity for participants to provide input, and that the families of policies were too long. And there were questions raised as to how would one indicate their dislike for a particular policy within the family of policies. So a couple of comments on that. The policies that were included in that feedback form are ones that relate to areas that were particularly top of mind.
Melissa, sorry, you cut out at the beginning of that sentence.
Oh,
We didn't
I'm
hear
sorry.
you. Yeah.
Okay. The topics that were chosen to be included in the feedback form were those that were top of mind for residents in the first phase of engagement. So these were things that were identified as emerging priorities, which is why we selected this particular policies that were included. The policies are intended to be read together. So each little, for lack of a better term, family of policies are intended to be read together. And so we're hesitant to divide those up too much because there is a relationship between them. Having said that, and Andrew can pull up a modified version of the feedback form in a moment, we have gone in and inserted some additional opportunities, sliding scales, within the broader key policy areas. So for example, in the key policy area of communication, you'll see now we've added sliding scales where people can provide input on the policies that relate to relationships with Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And then again, an opportunity to provide comments on relationship with adjacent municipal jurisdictions, etc. So we have provided a few more opportunities for that. There is, at the end of the feedback form, an open-ended question. And how this has worked well in other communities is if there is a particular policy or to policies in that family of policies that someone has a particular concern about, they tend to note it in that open-ended section at the end, right? And so that's why it's there, is to provide that additional opportunity to provide feedback. I recognize that there are some who would probably like the opportunity to comment on every single policy that is proposed. And that simply is not within the scope of the budget or timeline of this planning process. So what we have prepared will provide us with an appropriate level of input from the community, similar to other exercises that we've done in other municipalities, right? So again, just kind of to reiterate, policies that seem to be higher priority for members of the community, and we've included some more opportunities for feedback to be provided. If you're interested, Andrew can pull up the modified feedback form on the screen, and we can show you where we've slotted in some more opportunities for people to comment on. Are there any questions or comments?
Do you see my hand up?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Do I have the floor? Do I?
Yes.
Okay. So you opened tonight and you said there's correlation in one group, there's correlation that gives you some guidance, right? Kind of the questions in one particular section are kind of correlated so that they can give you some feedback. Am I correct?
Yes.
You know, I'm taking words out of your mouth. It's what you said. You said there's correlation between, so it gives you some feedback as to how we feel about this particular grouping. Okay, right. So I happen to have heard that, unless I misheard. I'm looking at strategic goals, the first grouping, and you have 10. You have 10 questions there. Now, I'm really interested in a couple of them. Let's say particularly number 9. I really would like to know how the village responded or would respond to the answer to the question number 9. And you tell me how that relates to question number 2, which relates to acting in case of an emergency. Can you answer me that?
So I guess in that case, you do have a point that the strategic goals are a bit different than the policies, where the policies are related to each other. Okay. But again, there is an opportunity at the end, the open-ended section, and if you felt particularly strongly about anything.
So there is no correlation.
Not with the strategic goals.
Okay.
With all the other groups of policies, they are related to each other.
Okay, so I can give, let's say I can waste the committee's time and go with about 5 items that aren't related, so, or correlated for that matter. So I'm personally, let's say, if I were chairing this, right, I would be interested in, let's say, 1 or 2 of the items and the feedback from the public. And I'm just wondering how much I can pick up from the answer to this. You have, let's say, 4 of these. If I'm trying to get some feedback from that one, what are the odds that a person is now going to say, okay, on number 9 of the strategic goals, I feel this way? Because we have bullets here to tick, which are fairly, they're not that time consuming. Someone can just tick them off. But for somebody to go back and like they have, let's say, 4 choices here, it'd be difficult for them to go at the end if they had several comments they want to make, but one of them involved this. What are the odds that we're going to get any sort of meaningful feedback on number 9 of the strategic goals? What are the odds of that?
So our experience is that if individuals feel strongly about any aspect in a feedback form that we create, that they do provide meaningful feedback in that open-ended question at the end.
Yeah, who designed this form?
That it is when we go out to the public to test policies in our draft plans, this is the methodology that we use.
Is-
So what we typically would do, now this was a modified version for a virtual open house. Now what we typically would do in an in-person open house is these policies would be on boards set up in a community hall where individuals would have an opportunity to read through the policies and then complete a feedback form at that location. So we modified it for the
Yeah.
virtual setting so that we ran through during the presentation the structure and intent of the plan so that you could go back later and complete that feedback form as close as possible as we could replicate from an in-person exercise.
So in other words, on number 9, then, we're getting a pretty diluted. Do you think number 9 in strategic goals, do you think that's an important question?
Option number 9.
Truth and reconciliation.
So the Truth and Reconciliation strategic goal is one that we include or see included in most of the OCPs that we work on, if not all of them. So it is an important aspect of every land use planning exercise and something that I think all municipalities would be remiss not to include in their plans.
Okay, so I'm really interested in that one. That one happens to be something I'm very, 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 very interested in. Okay, and I would really like to hear. I'm really disappointed that that wasn't a standalone question because of its immense importance. I happen to feel fairly strongly on that, and I'm really, really disappointed that we had this one opportunity. Okay, like Mariana's asked about this one glorious opportunity to ask about a density or whatever, which then I think that's very important. This one is, I think, is really, really important. We had the opportunity, and in my opinion, we missed it because we had in there with to be prepared for emergencies. I'm kind of thinking we're always prepared for emergencies, but this is a fundamental, like just a very, very fundamental, comprehensive, topic, and yet it's completely blurred. We've missed an opportunity here to really get some feedback from the public on this because we'll never know how they graded it. Even if they read a comment at the end, we don't know if they feel strongly, disagree, agree, whatever. So I'm with you as far as how important this is. I'm just supremely disappointed in how you put this out. I mean, it's so bad that I think you owe an apology to the chair.
I think one thing that we need to remember is that the strategic policies that have been put forward in the plan are the result of feedback that we received through the first phase of engagement. So those strategic goals are topics that were already discussed and put forth by the community through the community survey and the first public workshop that we held, where we had interactive breakout room discussions. And this is where that feedback is translated into the strategic goals. So there has been 2 opportunities for the public to provide input, and we took that and then created these strategic goals.
So I take that to mean that you won't be apologizing to the chair. Okay, I'm happy with your response. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I see Joel has a hand up.
Hi, Melissa. I was just curious if you could tell us how it's changed. I saw the original questionnaire. Has it changed at all since we last saw that, the first one?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've just included a couple more opportunities where we've provided those sliding scales where people could provide their input. So again, if you'd like to see it, we can pull it up on screen and you can have a look at it. What we're trying to do is strike that balance between, we have constraints of time and budget, right? So an ideal situation, I know that there are people in the community, there are always people in every community who would like to weigh in on every policy in the plan, which isn't, just isn't feasible, given the schedule that we have. So this was our looking at what was of most importance or highest priority for the community is where we've chosen to allocate those resources. Would you like to have a look at it?
Yes, I would be in favor of seeing it if we could at some.
Okay.
I've heard people want.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Ralph, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Melissa, what hasn't been laid out clearly is what does the provincial regulatory framework require of OCPs? And you know, are you saying that the provincial government requires a certain type of response regarding reconciliation with First Nations? Because you haven't laid any of that out, and it's only implied as to what we should be doing.
Right. So I think we have spoken throughout the process about ways in which we can incorporate the history and the voice of the Tsleil-Waututh people. And all of those efforts contribute to advancing truth and reconciliation within the community. Andrew and I have met with Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and they were very keen to see policies like those that we're proposing, right? Specifically policies that state that the community will advance truth and reconciliation. And as you look through the draft plan, you will notice that we've, wherever possible, included policies that speak to building relationships with the nation and supporting work that they are undertaking within the community.
But Melissa, that you haven't answered the question. What does the provincial legislation require municipalities to put in their OCPs? It sounds to me like you're interpreting as to what should be in there, and you're putting the words in the mouth of the OCP committee.
I can jump in a little bit, Melissa,
Sure.
if that's helpful. So I don't believe the Local Government Act states explicitly that you have to have policies regarding truth and reconciliation in the OCP. However, all OCPs are referred to Ministry of Community Development for adoption. One, in that step, in their process, they check with Ministry of Aboriginal Relations to ensure that Indigenous consultation has been done adequately. And so if that ministry sees, you know, absence of policies like truth and reconciliation and adequate consultation with local First Nations, then they can block adoption of OCPs.
Well, with all due respect, Andrew, if they've got, you're suggesting that they have a checklist of what they want to see and that they won't approve OCPs unless they see that. I want to see that in writing from the provincial government. But in the
Me too.
No, you laugh, but this is a serious subject.
I'm sorry. I've worked on other projects where the province has been very difficult to work with on exactly that topic. So I feel you, and I don't mean to make light.
No, that's just fine that they're going to be difficult, but the public needs to know that they're being difficult on that subject. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you know, recognizing we live in the tradition, you know, we live and work in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish Nations, and we look to work collaboratively with them. I don't have any problems with those kind of statements, but the kind of thing that you guys have laid out has gone way beyond anything that should be in a municipal OCP.
Is there a particular policy or that you find particularly egregious?
Can I
Where do
jump
we
in?
start the list?
May I jump in?
No, I think we have less, half an hour left before this meeting's over. We haven't even heard the draft comment, and we're off now on a policy thing. We've asked Melissa and Andrew, if you can give us the legislative basis for what has to go in the OCP. And when we get that, then we will, as a committee, can sit down and discuss what goes in it. Right now, I don't know what has to be done. I don't think that you've been able to contact the Tsleil-Waututh Band and get input from them. That tends to me to indicate that we're not getting truth and consolidation or whatever it's called, because it's a two-way street, this discussion, and we're not getting a two-way. And you're telling us requirements to go in the OCP, and I don't know what legally the provincial government insists on going in.
Andrew and I have met with Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and we've had discussions, high-level discussions about what they would like to see in the plan. And what they'd like to see in the plan is what every other nation is looking for in OCPs, right? They want to be recognized as right holders of the land. They want to see policies advancing truth and reconciliation. This is consistent and this is respectful. This is how OCPs are, working towards building the relationships with First Nations and their communities.
So are we going to get the legislation basis that you're talking about, or are we going to get fed back of what they wish to see in? I'd like to see them give us a history of what they think the history should be.
And you'll see that in the draft plan, we have a placeholder in the plan where we are inviting Tsleil-Waututh to share with us their history of the community. I think you need to separate what is legislatively required and what is being respectful to the nation, and recognize that the nation is, the one organization that can block adoption of your plan.
I would like that. That is the very point that we're trying to get to, that they have a legislative base to do that. Does that mean that every stakeholder that we've gone to talk to, that they have the right to block the OCP because they didn't see something in there that they wanted to see? Do they have that legislative authority as a stakeholder?
I think that's the distinction, in that the Indigenous communities are not stakeholders, they're rights holders.
Okay, Melissa, the bottom line is municipalities are a creature of the province. Our obligations are to meet the regulatory requirements of the provincial government. You need to bring back what are those regulatory requirements, including dealing with First Nations. And until such time as that's spelled out by the province via your inquiries, then all I hear is words being stuck in the mouth of the OCP committee.
I'd like to suggest that maybe we move on to something. We've got the questions for the planners, that they're going to go away and bring us back some information. We don't have that much time left, and we still want to have a look at the survey, and we still have the draft plan to cover. So can I make a suggestion that we just move forward on that item and have Andrew and Melissa gather some information for us?
I thought we were getting a draft OCP document. This survey thing has derailed this whole meeting.
Okay, can we let Melissa continue with the presentation from here?
Okay, so I do believe that there was some interest from Joel to look the modifications to the survey or to the feedback form.
I'm happy in the respective time to see the draft if that's better for everybody. I just, at some point, wouldn't mind seeing it before it goes out.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to pull up the draft plan on the screen and walk you through the structure of the plan so you can see, get an idea of what it's going to look like. Before we begin, I just want to note that what we will be distributing on Friday will be a simple Word document, right? So we haven't included photographs. It hasn't been laid out all fancy like in InDesign or anything like that. That will come once we've finalized the content. And so what will happen is this draft will be circulated on Friday. It will be posted on the municipality's website. It will be referred to Tsleil-Waututh Nation for their information. It will be distributed to the stakeholders who we've met with, sent to the Metro Vancouver as well. And so yourselves, members of the public, the referral agencies will have a period of time to provide their comments. We will take all of those consolidated comments and we will make revisions to the draft as necessary. So with that, we'll just walk you through so you have an idea of what's coming and have a look at it. So in terms of the table of contents, so we're going to begin by acknowledging the work of the OCP committee, residents who have taken time out to participate in various engagement activities. Thank our neighboring municipalities who have taken time to meet with us, as well as the various stakeholder groups that we've met with. So that will be the beginning of the plan. The first part of the plan really is kind of like background and context. So before we actually move into the policy section. So following the acknowledgement, there'll be an introduction, and then we'll describe the location of the community and the planning area. And so this will be where you will see some of the initial maps of the plan, right? So you'll see the municipal boundary, you'll see an aerial photograph as well. Moving forward, we're going to go through a little bit of providing an overview of what official community plans are. So again, you probably remember this from our Planning 101, but a very short description of what is an OCP, what does an OCP include. On the next page, how does an OCP relate to other plans? And so here, this is where we talk generally about that hierarchy of plans, but then more specifically about Belcarra's situation. So here, one of the things that is worth noting in Belcarra's case is that you are adopting you will adopt your OCP most likely before the new regional growth strategy is adopted by Metro Vancouver. And so typically what happens when you adopt new OCPs, you also, as a component of the OCP, adopt a regional context statement. Now, because Metro 2050 is going to be adopted imminently, we've included in here a description about how that process will follow once the regional plan is adopted. So that kind of lays out Belcarra's unique situation here. There's a section here that talks about the OCP planning process. So again, there'll be a short description about the 4 phases that we went through to develop the plan. And then there'll be a summary about the community engagement. So again, short summaries about the various components. So the work of the OCP review committee, the stakeholder interviews that we undertook, results from the community survey, open houses, engagement with Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So there'll be that section. There's also a section where we go through the history of Belcarra. So you'll see here a written description as well as an infographic timeline of key moments in Belcarra's history. And then following that, again, is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a placeholder section where we will invite on Friday, when we make the formal referral request to the nation, to provide input into the plan, invite them to help us craft or include their history in the plan as well. The next section is a bit of technical background. So we talk a little bit about the environmental characteristics of the land, population and growth forecasts for the community, and how the housing needs report, the results of the housing needs report inform the OCP. So that discussion is included in there. We also provide an overview of existing community services today. And so in this section here, you'll see maps that identify community facilities as well as the water network. This sort of front end of the plan concludes with a discussion about emerging priorities. And so these, again, are emerging priorities that were identified through that first phase of engagement. Conversations with residents in the open house, interviews with various stakeholders, conversations with municipal staff and yourselves, etc. Remember, we, in that first round of engagement, asked some questions of the community to help us define what Belcarra's community character is. So we included a summary of that input here in this portion of the plan. And that kind of concludes that first kind of third of the plan before we really get into the goals and policies, etc. So here we identify how it is that we came about with the vision and the strategic goals that we did. And again, referring back to the engagement and the input we received through the survey, through the open house, through our workshop with yourselves, and then we present the vision. The plan itself, we have identified 10 strategic goals that are overarching the plan itself. So these strategic goals have not changed from what you saw on the community feedback form the other day. We have identified 8 key policy areas. So the remainder of the plan is divided into these 8 sections. So there's key policy areas on natural environment, hazard lands, climate change, mobility, municipal infrastructure, land use designations, communication, collaboration, reconciliation, and implementation. So again, there's a note that, while we do have these key policy areas, the OCP is very much intended to be read as a whole, right? The key policy areas, when read together, form a comprehensive policy framework that will guide land use planning, growth and development in Belcarra to 2040. Under that first natural environment key policy area, we have policies that relate to lands that are under this jurisdiction of the under the jurisdiction of the Port Authority. We address lands that are designated regional conservation and recreation areas by Metro Vancouver. You want to switch to the next page, Andrew? policies that speak to features that have been identified by Metro Vancouver as environmentally sensitive areas, policies that relate to the tree canopy, invasive species management, wildlife management, water quality, and air quality. So again, I just want to emphasize that point that the policies of the plan are intended to be read together. So you will see, for example, policies that address wildlife in both wildlife management and in areas like waste management, right? Because there are animal issues related to waste. So you'll see some in both areas. Our second key policy area relates to hazard lands. So in this section here, we have policies that relate to your emergency response planning, steep slopes, flood and sea level rise hazards, wildfire management. We then have, as a third key policy area, climate change. And so we have policies that relate specifically to climate action planning, greenhouse gas reductions. And with greenhouse gas reductions, we've separated into sub areas. So there are policies that speak specifically to building improvements, vehicle energy efficiencies, low carbon energy sources, and then for everything else, other greenhouse gas reduction initiatives. Another key policy area is mobility. And so here we have policies that speak specifically to active transportation and trails, the road network, parking and transit, and water access. One thing I should have noted at the very beginning is that, and you've probably observed, is that there is a preamble in front of all of the policies to provide context so that someone who may not be as familiar with the community can have some context to relate the policies back to. Caroline, I see that your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Melissa. It's really hard to understand your audio. I'm having a hard time, and I don't know if it's just me, might be my internet, but it's really hard to understand your audio. It keeps on cutting and delaying. Thank you.
Okay. Is anyone else having a problem?
It's a struggle, Melissa, to catch what you're saying now.
Okay, well, maybe then, Andrew, maybe I'll hand it over to you and you
Absolutely. So the next policy area is municipal infrastructure, and here we've included policies on asset management and infrastructure planning, water, stormwater, liquid waste, and solid waste and recycling, and also a note about unserviced properties. And next we get into the real land use designations, which are, you know, the critical mapping component of the land use plan. And here we have the residential designation, which we've talked a lot about, and we've heard some really great points from the presentations today, but you know, just in the interest of time, won't get into too much. We also have the commercial designation, which we've listed, but it's important to note that this is not mapped. So this is a designation that is available to those who wish to redesignate their properties. And this is designed to respond to the community feedback we've received so far. There's also conservation and recreation. And so this land use designation is what applies to how we're categorizing the parks and other parcels in the village that serve that purpose. And this largely again reflects the previous or the current OCP. Also included the civic institutional land use, which applies to the village hall things like that. But the civic marine designation, natural tidal designation as well. And these were, the last two are interesting because these were referenced in the previous OCP, but they weren't necessarily listed as designations, but they were referenced in the Bedwell Bay Sustainability Plan. So we've just formalized those as land use plans to kind of modernize the intent behind those and the intent behind the Bedwell Bay Plan. It doesn't override that plan, but it just supports that intention. The next policy area, this is not a land use designation anymore, is the communication, collaboration, and reconciliation policy area. And this was one that we've heard loud and clear is really important. And this one is broken up into 3 areas as well. And that's related to that relationship with Tsleil-Waututh Nation and relationships with neighboring jurisdictions and government agencies, and the relationship with the Belcarra community. And so we heard that it's very important for the village to communicate on some level with all 3 of these groups, and they all have different needs and considerations that need to be taken into account. And then the last section is the implementation section, which I'm hoping Melissa's audio might be in better working order, because I know this is her favorite topic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to speak as loudly as I can. I have a brand new computer, so I'm not sure what the problem is, but implementation. So I think one of the things that I'd like to stress is that amending the OCP should be something that municipalities are doing on a regular basis, right? Because that indicates that you're using it and that you're making progress in implementing the policies. So one of the things that, and I do a lot of implementation work for municipalities to see how effective they are in implementing policies. And what we find makes a huge difference is reviewing the policies on an annual basis. So as you're working through your budgeting process and looking at your strategic plan every year, also having a look at your official community plan. And those 3 cycles should work together so that when municipal council is making decisions about capital projects, they can refer back to the OCP to look at specific policies, right? So there are policies that are proposed in the draft plan that speak to that, connecting those 3 cycles together that talk about looking at progress that has been made on an annual basis. And for transparency, publishing annual progress reports on the municipal website. And these don't need to be onerous. A lot of municipalities have a 1-page of bullet points that they report on every year, but it gives residents, insight into how the OCP is working for the community. So what is being proposed here is a suite of policies that talk about how you would undertake that monitoring, how you would evaluate whether or not you're making progress, and then how you would report on that. And then the last piece of that cycle is if you're finding on the one hand that you're ticking the boxes, you've completed policies, you're doing what you said you're going to do, then amend the plan, right? If one of the policies is to undertake a ditch management strategy, for example, and that strategy has been completed, there may be new policies that speak to how it's going to be implemented, and that should be incorporated into the OCP. So it's that constant monitoring, reviewing, reporting, and adjusting if necessary. one of the things that once we've confirmed the policies and we're happy with the plan, what we'll do, and Andrew, maybe you can just skip ahead. Yeah, here we go. What we'll do is, as an appendix to the OCP, we highly recommend including an implementation matrix. So for each of the policies, the plan, identifying what level of priority they are, what is the timeline that you'd like to see that policy initiated or completed, noting who's responsible for championing that forward, whether or not you need a partner to help you make progress with that, and then identifying where the money's going to come from. And some of the policies will be able to measure performance through some kind of like measurable data, right? And the municipality is likely already collecting all kinds of data that we can use for this purpose. But the general idea is that you would have, for each policy, a very clear path to implementation and ensuring that you're making progress. And so the idea being is that as you look at this, you know, on an annual basis, or, you know, if that's too often for Belcarra, but when you look at it regularly, you can see, or you can better identify progress that's being made and identify reasons why, potentially why, it's not advancing the way that you would like. So this is something that we will prepare and include as an appendix once we've confirmed all of the policies in the plan. Ralph, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Melissa. On that last subject of reporting, annual review and reporting, this is a huge issue for a small community like Belcarra. We have so many reporting requirements, provincial reporting requirements, that have been downloaded onto the community on a mandatory annual basis that we must fulfill. To be undertaking annual report cards on the OCP, quite frankly, is unrealistic for a small community like Belcarra. It's going to drive up the administrative overhead. And it's one of the things, when you talk about financial sustainability and all the rest of it, when you drive up the reporting demands, and we got them coming at us left, right, and center from the provincial government, is that it means increased staff time, which is a huge administrative overhead dollars. And so you know, annual report cards on the OCP, totally unrealistic for a small community like Belcarra. If it was, you know, every 3 years, fine, okay. We're supposed to review OCPs every 5 years. In a small community like Belcarra, that there is relatively small amount of change. That's why it ends up every 10 years. And that's not uncommon amongst other municipalities. But
okay, Ralph, can I just interject here? We have 5 minutes left in the meeting. And I have at least one thing I want to, so I'm going to have to figure out where are we going with this meeting? What are we supposed to do? Have you finished, Melissa, with the presentation, or what are we going to do with the document? Sorry to cut off discussion, but we can't get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we would like to do, so we will on Friday distribute the plan. And what we would like to do with you is, Ian, as chair of the committee, if you could work with the committee to consolidate comments and feedback that members have, and then provide us with a consolidated document that we can incorporate into our review with comments from other agencies as well. that would be most helpful. Now, we have scheduled a meeting with you 2 weeks from today.
right?
So the intent of that meeting would be to review those consolidated comments.
Okay, sorry, you're, you're breaking up again. I didn't hear the first part of your sentence there.
Yeah. So our intent would be that we would use that meeting to review your consolidated comments.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, so that's our assignment. That's fine. Once we get the draft of the, I take it this is a Word document?
It is,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so we can go through that and get our comments together. There's one other item that I'd like to ask the committee is I thought that we could discuss the need of whether we have another public consultation process. And I thought that that perhaps could happen on the 15th, but I'm advised by Carolina that the council would like more lead time. And so they are asking me if the committee feels on the basis of what information they have right now, if they would like to recommend to council to have another public consultation process, probably in August sometime. So I don't know if I can, I know that within the consultation process, just before we open it up for discussion, there is ample time for residents to make comments. We're asking also the residents, once I believe this draft document will be available to the residents as well. So they would have an opportunity to write to the committee any concerns that they have, and we could discuss and decide whether that would be included in our comments. The other opportunity that residents need to recognize that the draft document once it's forwarded to council, then council will have public consultation before it's adopted. So there's an opportunity at that point to make comments. So this is not the end of opportunity for public consultation. Carolina, I guess I'm going to be corrected, or or am I?
No, just
Help my voice.
No, I can hear you fine. No, just for some clarification. So yeah, so if an extra open house is what the committee would like to recommend to council, I would have to bring this to council on our next meeting. So it would be good to have that discussion tonight. And yeah, and as Ian pointed out, once this comes to council, we by law have to do public hearings on it. So there will be more opportunity for the public to come and give feedback when we're about to vote on this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So if I can open it up, does anybody have any comments on that or in the committee? Paul, you've got something?
I'd like to hear Joel's comments regarding, I think he's asking for some information on another questionnaire, so I'd like to hand it over to him if I could.
All I was asking, Paul, I was just wondering, I guess assumed you were looking at the original document when you were reading it out. I hadn't seen a second one. I don't think it had been shared. I don't know.
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I thought you were requesting one, Joel. I thought you were requesting another one. And
I was requesting is I was hoping to see it. I was hoping that the committee sees it before it gets sent out to the public to save some time, just so that we're happy with what's going out. Yeah, and I'd like the opportunity to look through the draft OCP as well. And I'm unclear whether the draft OCP is going to everybody right now before we get a chance to look through it, or if it's going to be something that we get to look through first.
Okay, thanks. I guess Ralph, you're next in line for comment, hopefully
thank
on
you.
the meeting.
Yeah. Well, regarding the draft document, I agree with Joel that the OCP committee should first review it and provide its comments, et cetera, before the draft goes to the community. Okay. And with regard to additional public input, we've had 2 public information meetings, and for 3 months, anybody in the public has had the opportunity to email the OCP committee or the council representative. And, you know, it's not that there's a lack of opportunity, that there's been a lack of opportunity. The opportunity has been there and will continue to be there beyond the OCP committee. But the OCP members have done an extensive amount of in-depth examination of the different issues, and which puts them at a distinctly different position than the general public. So I think we should continue on with our schedule as it's laid out, and the community can at any time from this point onward, as they've always had, can communicate by email to the OCP committee.
Okay, thanks. Larry, then you're.
Yeah, on the survey, I agree that it would, or sorry, on the draft OCP, I agree that it would be good if the committee could see it first. And on the open house, I would support another meeting. I think it's been hard in some cases for people to have a clear line of communication with this process. And so I would support another meeting. And I don't know if the timing would be such that it could be an in-person meeting. I don't find the open houses online are as open as an open house meeting. That's
if we're going to have it, it's got to be an face to face.
Yeah, we just lose so much by not having that, and people lose the opportunity to talk with everybody and directly present what they're concerned about and what they would like to see. And I've missed not having that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Paul again?
Yeah. Are we gonna, Joel, are we gonna have a questionnaire go out? And Ian, are we gonna have a questionnaire go out before the open house?
I don't quite understand the context of the question.
In order to focus the interests of the public for the open house, is the idea to have, like, I understand we're going to put another questionnaire that Joel and the rest of the committee wants to look at first. Am I right there? In other words, is this questionnaire going to be approved by us and then sent to the open house before the open house or not?
Tonight's the first I heard of another questionnaire, so I'm sorry, I'm not in the loop.
Okay, I think I misinterpreted Joel's question, so maybe I should just step out.
We'll find all this out. What we need to decide, and we're running over time, sorry, is it the committee's recommendation to council to have another consultation process with the residents of Belcarra? Anybody have any comments, or should we have a vote?
My comment, Ian, would only be, this is Joel, that we would let the community see the draft before we have this meeting. So if we had one, just so that people could look through it and come with everything they want to share or everything they want to.
Most certainly, we should be very close to having a finished document so that the residents can see where we're at.
And I would support in person as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Ian, sorry,
Yes, Sandra?
I support it, but summer might be a bad time, like in terms of timing for people going on holidays, etc.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
the only thing I mean, you might not get everybody that's
Okay, well,
interested. So
good point. And so when is school back? End of summer.
If I could interject, the month of August is the typical summer shutdown for the municipality, etc.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll just, if we're going to have another one, we'll let council decide when, if that's okay.
Yeah, if I may jump in, and yeah, I would have to bring it to council, and that's how that would go, and then I would come back to the committee with the information. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Mary Ann, you've got,
Yeah, just one quick thing. If we're going to, if we get the green light to have a public consultation and ideally an in-person consultation, I would like to suggest that we look at doing something like renting the Anmore School auditorium or a place that's large enough. Because I've been to meetings before where I had to stand outside because the village hall was just too small for the number of people who wanted to attend. And this is pretty important. Maybe not that many people will show up as have to some of our other meetings around zoning and whatnot, but I don't think it's not ideal when the space that you have isn't large enough for everybody to at least get into the same room. So that's.
thanks. We do have what do they call it now? We've got Zoom potential and also in person in the hall. So it's all equipped to have either or both. So.
The Bell Carroll Hall with Zoom should be more than adequate.
Well, I think we'll leave that to council. I'd just like to get a consensus that we can make a recommendation. So can I propose that that we recommend to council that we have one more public consultation meeting? Everybody in favor? Anybody against it? One, two people, not three. Okay, three not, then okay, thank you. All right. So where are we now? The OCP document will be coming out on the website then on Friday. Is that correct?
If the committee would like to look at it before it goes to the public, then we would distribute it just to the committee.
I think that's the most appropriate, and Melissa.
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay. Any questions or comments, or have we exhausted so far? Okay, I guess we need a motion to adjourn. Larry, seconded by Mary Ann. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks for your patience, and we look forward to seeing the draft on Friday, sooner if possible, but I guess sooner would be tomorrow, but
when do the public get it?
What?
It has to go through the committee. So that's what they were just talking about, Sherry. You would have to go through the committee.
So when do we get it?
After the committee is dealt with it.
We need to look at it, Sherry, to figure out when.
It's going to be distributed on Friday, so. will
To
we
the
get it
committee.
To the committee on Friday.
Going everywhere on Friday.
No, we've just decided it's just gonna go to the committee. We're gonna have a look at it. and
Isn't
it'll
what
be
I
out-
heard. I heard that Melissa said it was going to be distributed to the province and the natives on Friday.
So this is what the committee is requesting from Melissa and Andrew to be distributed to them for comments prior to go to everybody else.
Good.
And that's a fair ask. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
that's fair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Melissa
Good
and
night.
Andrew.
Good night.
Thanks very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.
Okay, take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
Melissa. Thank